On a lonely, dusty road, a tired cowboy noticed a silent bride standing beside her broken wagon, her face calm, but her eyes hiding something deeper. He could have walked away like everyone else, because he had nothing to gain and his own life was already full of struggle. But something about her quiet presence made him stop. Without asking questions, he knelt down and began fixing the damaged wheel. His hands rough, but his heart unexpectedly gentle. The bride watched him in silence, not offering help, not even speaking. Yet there was a strange weight in the way she looked at him, as if she knew something he did not. Time passed, the sun lowered, and finally the wagon was fixed. The cowboy stood up, refused any payment, and simply walked away, never turning back. But behind him, the silent bride kept watching, because the man who helped her for nothing had no idea that she was not helpless at all. But the hidden owner of 3 powerful ranches. The story follows a lonely cowboy who spent his life working under the burning sun and cold nights, earning just enough to survive, but never enough to feel at peace. He lived far from the busy town, with no family, no one waiting for him, and no reason to expect kindness from the world. One evening, as the sky turned orange and the road grew quiet, he noticed a young bride standing beside a broken wagon. Her dress was simple but clean, her posture calm, and her face carried a quiet strength that did not match her situation. She did not cry or panic like others would. Instead, she stood still, watching the road as if she was waiting for something or someone. The cowboy slowed down, feeling a strange pull he could not explain. There was something unusual about her silence, something that made the moment feel heavier, as if this simple meeting was about to change more than just one broken wagon. He stepped closer without saying much, placed his worn tools on the ground, and quietly began examining the broken wheel. As the evening air grew cooler and the silence between them felt heavier than before. She did not ask for help, yet she did not stop him either, and that quiet acceptance made him feel as if she had been expecting him all along. His hands moved with care, tightening loose parts and adjusting the damaged wood, but his eyes kept noticing small details that did not fit her situation. Her dress was plain, yet it was perfectly clean despite the dusty road. Her posture straight and calm, as if she was not worried at all, and her gaze followed every movement he made with unusual focus. She finally spoke in a soft voice, thanking him, but her words were brief, controlled, and carried a strange confidence that did not belong to someone stranded and alone. The cowboy nodded and continued working, but inside, a quiet curiosity began to grow, because he had helped many travelers before, and none of them had ever felt like this. As the wheel slowly came back into place, he felt her eyes on him again, not in fear or desperation, but in a way that felt almost thoughtful, as if she was measuring something beyond his actions. He tried to ignore it, telling himself she was just another traveler. Yet the air around them carried a tension he could not explain. Time seemed to move differently, each moment stretching longer as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in fading gold and shadow. The sound of his tools echoed softly, mixing with the distant wind, while she remained still, her silence no longer empty but filled with something unspoken. At one point, he glanced up and found her looking directly at him, her expression unreadable, yet her eyes held a depth that made him look away first, something that rarely happened to him. A strange thought crossed his mind, one he quickly pushed aside, that this meeting was not as simple as it appeared. He tightened the final bolt, checked the wheel carefully, and stood up slowly, brushing the dust from his hands. His work was done, yet he did not move immediately, because something inside him hesitated, as if leaving now would mean missing something important. She stepped slightly closer, her presence calm, yet powerful in a way that did not match her quiet voice. And for a brief second it felt like she might say something more, something that would explain the strange feeling growing between them. But instead, she remained silent again, and that silence spoke louder than words ever could. The cowboy forced a small nod, telling himself there was nothing more to this moment. Yet as he prepared to walk away, he could not shake the feeling that this simple act of kindness had connected him to something far greater than he could see, something hidden beneath her calm exterior, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. He forced himself to step back, breaking the quiet pull of the moment, and without asking for anything in return, He simply nodded and turned away from her as if it was just another small job on another long day. She did not reach out to stop him, yet her eyes followed him with a steady intensity that lingered long after he had taken his first few steps. The air felt heavier with each step he took, as though something unseen was trying to hold him there. But he kept moving forward, choosing silence over questions he could not answer. His boots pressed into the dry dirt, each sound echoing louder than usual. While behind him the world remained strangely still, he had helped many people before and walked away without a second thought. But this time was different, and he could feel it deep inside his chest, like a quiet warning he did not understand. For a brief moment, he almost stopped, almost turned back, because it felt like she wanted to say something important, something that could change everything. Yet no words came from her, and the silence stretched even further. The wind picked up softly, brushing against his coat as if urging him forward. But his mind stayed behind, caught in the image of her calm face and unreadable eyes. That he frowned slightly, confused by the weight of a simple goodbye, because nothing about the situation made sense anymore. She had been stranded, alone, and yet she carried no fear, no desperation. Only a quiet control that did not belong to someone in need. As he walked farther away, that feeling grew stronger, like he had just stepped away from a moment that mattered more than he realized, a moment that would not come again. He tried to shake it off, telling himself he was imagining things, but his instincts rarely lied, and they were telling him that he had just left something unfinished. The road ahead stretched empty, yet it no longer felt the same, as if the path itself had changed without him noticing. That he slowed down slightly, his thoughts pulling him back again, wondering who she really was and why her silence felt louder than words. He remembered the way she had watched him, not with gratitude alone, but with something deeper, something almost knowing, and that memory stayed with him like a shadow he could not escape. Still, he did not turn back, because some part of him feared what he might discover if he did, and so he kept walking, carrying that strange feeling with him, unaware that behind him the quiet bride remained standing beside her wagon, watching him disappear into the distance with a calm expression, as if she already knew their story was far from over, and that the man who chose to walk away had no idea he had just stepped out of a moment that could change his entire life forever. The next morning he reached the small town earlier than usual, yet the air already felt different, filled with whispers that moved faster than the wind as people gathered in corners, speaking in low voices about someone important who had arrived during the night. He tried to ignore it at first, tying his horse and stepping toward the general store, but the tension in the crowd pulled his attention without asking for permission. Names were not spoken clearly, yet the words powerful, wealthy, and owner of 3 large ranches repeated again and again, creating a strange echo that made him pause near the entrance. As he listened more carefully, a quiet unease began to rise inside him, because something about the way they described her did not feel distant or unfamiliar. They spoke about a woman who carried herself with calm authority, someone who did not need to prove her strength because it was already visible in the way she stood and the way she looked at people. That detail struck him harder than expected, bringing back the image of the silent bride on the dusty road, her steady gaze, her controlled voice, and the quiet confidence that never matched her situation. That he stepped inside slowly, his movements no longer as certain as before, while the voices continued around him, adding more pieces to a picture he was not ready to see. They mentioned her simple clothing when she first arrived, how no one recognized her at first, and how quickly everything changed once her identity became known. His chest tightened slightly, and for a moment he tried to convince himself it was just a coincidence, that many people could share similar traits. Yet deep down he already knew the truth was not that simple. Someone described her eyes, calm but sharp, as if she understood more than she revealed, and that single detail removed any doubt he had left. The cowboy went still, his thoughts racing back to the moment he walked away. The silence, the feeling that he had left something unfinished, something important he could not name. That he realized then that it was not just a strange encounter. It was a moment he had misunderstood completely. And now it was returning to him with a weight he could not ignore. The voices grew louder as people spoke with excitement and respect, talking about her land, her power, and the influence she carried across the region. Yet none of that surprised him as much as it should have, because he had already seen something greater in her before any title was spoken that he stepped back slightly, his mind trying to process the truth that had been quietly waiting for him since the night before, and a single thought settled clearly in his mind. The silent bride he helped without hesitation was not helpless at all. She was the very woman everyone was now speaking about with awe. And the moment he chose to walk away was no longer just a simple act. It had become the turning point of something far bigger than he ever imagined, by the time he returned to his small place on the edge of the land. The weight of the truth had already settled deep inside him, yet he still tried to focus on his usual routine, hoping the feeling would fade, but it only grew stronger with every passing moment. Then, just as the sun began to lower again, a distant sound broke the silence, steady and unmistakable, the sound of horses approaching in formation. That he stepped outside, his eyes narrowing slightly as figures appeared through the dust, moving with purpose and control. And at the center of them was a presence he recognized before he could fully see her face. As they came closer, the air itself seemed to shift, carrying a quiet authority that demanded attention without force. And when they finally stopped in front of him, everything became still. The guards remained at a respectful distance, yet their posture spoke clearly of who stood among them. And then she stepped forward, no longer just the silent bride from the road, but someone whose calm now carried undeniable power. That he stood frozen, not out of fear, but out of realization, as the truth he had already begun to accept now stood directly in front of him. She looked at him with the same steady eyes, yet this time there was no silence holding her back, only purpose. She spoke his name softly, surprising him in a way he did not expect, and then she thanked him, not with simple words, but with a sincerity that carried weight, reminding him of the moment he chose kindness without knowing anything about her. He tried to respond, but the words felt distant, as if they no longer belonged in this moment. She continued, her voice calm yet clear, explaining that she had watched him carefully, not because she doubted him, but because she rarely saw someone act without expecting something in return. Then she revealed what the town had only whispered, that she was the owner of the lands surrounding them, the one people spoke about with respect and caution, and that the broken wagon had never truly defined her. It had only hidden her for a brief moment. The cowboy lowered his gaze slightly, absorbing every word, realizing that what he thought was a simple act had reached far beyond what he imagined. She stepped closer, closing the distance that once felt so uncertain, and for a moment the world around them seemed to fade again, leaving only the truth standing between them. She told him that power had shown her many faces of people, but kindness without reason was rare, and that was why she had come back, not to repay a favor, but to acknowledge something real. His heart beat heavier as he finally understood that the moment he almost turned back to had now returned to him in full. And this time, there was no silence left to hide its meaning. That he stood there in complete silence, unable to fully grasp how a simple moment on a dusty road had led him here, facing a woman whose presence carried both power and quiet warmth. She looked at him with calm certainty and offered him a chance to change his life, not as a reward, but as a choice he had earned through pure intention. That he hesitated, not because he doubted her, but because he finally understood something deeper than wealth or opportunity, that what truly mattered was the honesty of his actions when no one was watching. Slowly, he accepted, not just the offer, but the meaning behind it, realizing that kindness given without expectation never goes unnoticed. As the sun faded behind them, the lonely cowboy was no longer alone, and the silent bride was no longer a mystery. Because in that quiet exchange, both of their lives had changed forever, proving that sometimes the smallest act can open the door to a destiny far greater than anyone could ever imagine.